I'm going to tell you about some work that I've been doing with an artist, David Hockney. I'm an optical scientist, and it's the cultural aspect of the International Year of Light that we're going to be addressing. First, let me tell you who David Hockney is, who I listed as my co-author on this. David Hockney, two well-respected dictionaries of art and artists call him perhaps the most critically acclaimed artist of his generation. The posterity may acclaim him the greatest of modern portraitists. If there were a Nobel Prize in art, David Hockney certainly would be considered for it. He's a world-class artist, and his eye as an artist allowed him to see certain features in paintings that other people had noticed but had no idea where they came from. And this started a long collaboration, which I'm going to very briefly tell you about the results today.
David Hockney, our most celebrated living artist.
He is considered to be one of Britain's greatest contemporary artists. His originality and skill have ensured his success from the beginning of his career.
The thing about David is he has always been interested in imaging, how images are made.
I admit, for instance, I am interested in pictures. I keep saying this. I'm interested in how you make pictures.
As a result of him being interested in how you make pictures, how images are made, we've made discoveries about which I'm going to tell you today, but only if the slides advance. Oh, so I'm going to talk fast. I'm speaking in English. The poor simultaneous translators have their work cut out for them because I'm talking so fast. If you go to art-optics.com, that webpage will immediately bounce you to my university webpage where you can download copies of all of our publications, and you can see in much greater detail and much more information than I'm able to show you today. And since some of you won't remember art-optics.com, I also purchased the domain name optics-art.com. So either way, you should remember that, and you can go there and you can download much of the information. If we go back in time, if you go to the Hermitage and start, I guess, in the basement, whenever the oldest time is in there, we go back to 4,000 years ago. The paintings that were done 4,000 years ago are flat, they're two-dimensional. We can clearly see that he's representing a human being there, but it doesn't look very realistic. We come forward in time, Pisanello, 1440, again, flat, two-dimensional, much more elaborate, but then we come to Jan van Eyck. We see this guy, and if I magnify a portion of him, if we magnify a portion of Jan van Eyck, yeah, it's not working very well. So I'm going to try that again. Let me try that one more time. There we go. Generations of historians wondered, how did Van Eyck represent somebody so realistically? Somebody that if this gentleman walked from behind the screen right now, we would all instantly recognize him. How did the art transform itself so dramatically? And there's a very strong clue in that painting itself. Every feature that I can show you was based on optical projections, as we will talk about, could have been done with one lens of a pair of reading spectacles, which, as this painting shows you, certainly existed at the time. Here's a pair of reading spectacles, and what my assistant's going to do is rotate the spectacles to project an image with them. And when they are rotated, you can see what the characteristic of all projected images. The sky is below, the earth is above. What's not so obvious is what's called the parody. The parody of the scene is reversed. Left is reversed with right. If we come and look at geometrical objects, we come to 4,000 years ago. We come forward in time. Now, we don't need to fit a perfect perspective-corrected hexagon to this to see that there's something wrong with the perspective. We come to Jan van Eyck, and we see this chandelier. If I magnify that chandelier, it looks incredibly real. What's not clear is if I went to the real painting and I put my hand over the chandelier, I would completely cover it. I've taken a chandelier that is the size of my cupped hand, blown it up to be, I don't know, 3 meters across, and it's maintained its fidelity. How did Van Eyck do that? And the answer is optics. There's a length scale in here. I'm not going to talk much about that today. After we made our discoveries, Marc Demey, University of Ghent, fit a perfect perspective-corrected hexagonal chandelier to the painting, and we want to see how well it fits. So let's fit that chandelier to the painting and see if it fits. Now, depending upon how skeptical you are, if you look at this, it looks like it fits incredibly well. But if you look carefully, you'll see there's deviations of a couple of millimeters. The size of a pencil lead is how much the perfect idealized computer-generated chandelier fits to the painting. If this were a real chandelier whose image were projected, a real handmade chandelier from the 1400s can't fit perfectly. So simultaneously, the incredible fit yet deviation is strong circumstantial evidence that optics was used. As a result of this, every painting that we've analyzed that we can show optics were used are paintings that are in the Hermitage, the Louvre, the Prado, museums that, if you believe the directors of their museums, 25 million people a year visit those museums, and nobody before us had realized that optics was used. And as a result, we have a thesis named after us, the Hockney-Falco thesis in art history. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to very quickly talk about two paintings. The second one I'll talk about, French Ambassadors, is in London. This painting, husband and wife, in fact, is, I don't know, a kilometer from here in the Hermitage. So your homework assignment after I'm done is go to the Hermitage, look at that painting yourself, and you'll see exactly what I'm going to tell you that'll show you that optics was used that nobody had noticed before. That painting was done by Lorenzo Lato 75 years before Galileo, 75 years before people presumably thought optics could have been used to create a painting. David Hockney had collected together all of the paintings, color photocopies of all the paintings that looked to him worthy of further consideration. That's the length of a tennis court, to give you a length scale. And if we magnify this a little bit, he's organized the paintings chronologically, paintings from Northern Europe on the upper wall, Southern Europe on the lower wall, looking to see what happens, is something in Europe before Southern Europe, how does the knowledge diffuse, what is taking place, and this particular painting is the one that's in the Hermitage. Now, we're going to talk about only a few features, and again, go to art-optics.com, and you can see much more information that we've extracted about this painting. But the first thing you might notice, if we take that octagonal pattern in the very elaborate table covering, it goes out of focus. It's in focus, it's out of focus. Well, so what? There's the photographer in the audience. The photographer is very used to seeing a scene, part of the scene partially in focus, part out of focus. But we can see his wine bottle in focus. The car back there is out of focus. Big deal. The big deal is if you had never seen a projected image, if you'd never seen a photograph, you've never simultaneously seen part of a scene in focus, part out of focus. The human eye naturally refocuses. If I focus my gaze on this young lady in the front row, she's in focus. If I focus on an exit sign in the back, my brain doesn't tell me that it's caused the muscles in my eyeballs to contract to refocus, and my brain forms an image that the entire scene is in focus. A camera can't do that. So that's our strong circumstantial evidence that a lens was used, but there's much more to it than that. There's one set of vanishing lines in the front, another set in the back, and I'm going to show you in a minute there's a third set. If I put the painting, or put that back into the painting, and I try to correct for perspective, it doesn't matter what I do, I can never get this quite right. You can see this is too big compared to that. There's nothing I can do to get this whole thing in perspective. Now, if what I told you is true, that optics was used to project that image, you might think, well, that makes no sense. If optics were used to project it, we should be able to correct for perspective. I'm going to show you why optics is more complicated than that. So I take that scene, put it back into the painting. It goes out of focus somewhere in here. At the same depth into the painting where this goes out of focus, we look elsewhere on this painting. And again, this is in the Hermitage. Go look at this painting with your own eyes, and you can see this for yourself. There's one set of vanishing lines in the front, a second set of vanishing lines in the back, and they differ by 3 degrees. I can reproduce this if I mount a camera on a tripod, so the only thing I can do is move the lens in and out to focus further or closer. I take a photograph. I paint the front of this. I've got the back there too, but I'm ignoring that. Now I refocus further into the carpet. Counterintuitively, to focus further away, I actually have to pull the lens toward me. That changes the vanishing point. It also changes the magnification. I've already painted this. Now I paint that. That ruler is not straight. That ruler is kinked, and it's kinked by 3 degrees. Exactly like in the painting, because of having to refocus the optics. Well, I told you I couldn't fit a perspective-corrected octagon, but I'm going to try anyway. So if I take the octagon, I'm not going to use the length scale in today's talk, so let me just take that away. And I'm going to maintain color today. Always, the front of the painting is going to be in blue. If I try to correct for perspective and I lay that on top, it doesn't fit. It just misses entirely. But it fits here. So let's be good artists. It fits in front. Let's mark in, oh, sorry, that's not what Lorenzo Lato saw. With a single element lens projecting an image at very high magnification, the depth of field is very small. He could never see entirely the scene in focus. Only the front is in focus. Let's paint the front in, mark the front in, and now refocus, which requires pulling the lens toward us. Well, it doesn't fit in the front anymore, but it doesn't matter because we've already marked that in. Now it fits in the middle. We'll mark that in, refocus a third time, and we've got the back. And everything fits to a few millimeters. And it can't fit any better than a few millimeters if you project the image of a real carpet, handmade Anatolian carpet. This is the painting. The distance across the woman's shoulders is 26 centimeters. The distance across a real woman's shoulders is 46 centimeters. I know that because I have a wife and 2 daughters, so I have 3 data points. Scientists need data points. I've got 3 of them. That means the magnification is 0.56. It's very high magnification. Mentally picture yourself walking through an art museum. When you see a portrait, or the portraits that are outside here, that in the entrance as we walked in, sort of the people are half life size. They're not life size. They're created at very high magnification, not the size of magnification that if I took your picture with my iPhone, the scene of somebody that's 2 meters tall gets reproduced on the sensor in here that's a few millimeters tall, very low magnification. At high magnification, the depth of field is small. I know where it goes out of focus. I now know the depth of field, an optical property, in real units of centimeters, so I can calculate something. I've got two equations from geometrical optics, and I know the magnification in front, I know the depth of field in front. There's 3 regions, so I've got 6 equations and 7 unknowns. I'm in an art school, 6 equations, 7 unknowns. What does that mean?
This is it. That moment they told us about in high school where one day algebra would save our lives.
6 equations, 7 unknowns. We did learn that in high school, that if we make one assumption, everything else follows. We have no more control over the situation. And I'm going to make the assumption that the distance from my lens to that carpet was about, I don't know, 1.5 meters, 1.75 meters. And I put error bars on that. Once I do that, all the magnifications, all the depths of field come directly from algebra. So geometrical optics tells us that if Lorenzo Lotto used a lens, there must be 3 regions and 3 sets of magnifications. So when I try to fit this blue region, after I refocus, the distance from that kink to that kink decreases by a measured 13.1%. Algebra tells me it should have decreased by 12.6%. It agrees to 0.5% accuracy with the laws of geometrical optics, a painting. When I refocus, the magnification changes by a different amount, but I calculate a different amount, and again it agrees to 0.5%. So we're not saying optics is the only way to get perspective correct. We're saying optics is the only way to get perspective wrong, and precisely to 0.5% accuracy, these artists got the perspective wrong. I have a high-resolution infrared camera. In fact, I brought it again to St. Petersburg. Infrared penetrates through many pigments, including red. And in this particular case, we can see through the red. So let's take that camera and take it to the Hermitage. And this I did in 2008. There's the painting, Lorenzo Lotto. It's in a different room today. It's really easy to see infrared. It shows it beautifully. And so now I've got an infrared photo. This is the photograph in the visible. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to just, should point out, he's wearing black, she's wearing black. There's many, many features here I don't have time to talk about today. But just notice this region here. Her black is different than this black, and the infrared penetrates differently. If I magnify this central octagonal pattern, we can see much more clearly than we could in the visible. In a space of 6 centimeters, there's presumably, since we're in an art building, artists here. What I'm going to show you is in the space of the width of my hand, the artist used 3 distinctly different types of lines. In the front region, let me bring it over here and magnify it as much as possible, it looks traced. I only care about these lines, so let's pay attention to that. After refocusing, abruptly, things go bad. After refocusing, the magnification changed by 13%. He couldn't match a geometrical pattern. It's impossible. So he had to fake it. He had to try to make things look good. He finally makes it look reasonably good. He refocuses again, and he gives up. This is Lorenzo Lotto's case. So I had a student in art education reproduce this. It's going to take that octagonal pattern, project it through one lens of a pair of spectacles onto a piece of transparent plastic, and then when he's all done, overlay it on a life-size copy of the Lorenzo Lotto painting, which is sort of this size. So here's John. He starts painting onto the transparent plastic. The region that's closest to him jumps ahead, completes that region that's closest to him, and now has to refocus. He has to pull the lens further from the carpet, reducing the magnification. He'll do that intermediate region in a different color, again on the plastic. jump ahead and finish that, and then refocus one final time because he can no longer see it. He has no choice but to refocus. And does that final region, and when he's all done, he will take this down and overlay it on the life-size copy of the painting, and we'll see if it fits. And it fits perfectly. This is how Lorenzo Lotto did it with optics. And we refer to that painting that's here in the Hermitage as our Rosetta Stone. We've extracted so much information from it. And I'm just going to skip over this. So just go to art-optics.com and you can read all the reasons, the many more things that I've shown you today. One other painting I'm going to show you, and I'll go through it quickly. There's a globe here. If I take that globe and I rotate it and I magnify it, there's Sicily. Sicily is in 5-point font. Your computer doesn't give you 5-point font because you can't read it. It's too small. Hans Holbein has covered a painting that's actually not that much smaller than this screen. Every square centimeter of that he's covered with that kind of accuracy. But what is this? If you could walk up to the front and look at this at a grazing angle, it's a skull. At this point in our studies, I looked at this and I said, this is a really bad skull. In art history books, everybody's really impressed that he made a skull. That's a bad skull. How did he make a bad skull? There's a skull. If I linearly compress it, it looks like this. There's Holbein's skull. There's a real skull. Holbein's skull, the jaw's too long. There's a bulge back here. He's got that sinister right eye. I mean, if you were walking along the street and you saw a skull like that, there's some satanic cult involved because it's just too scary. Could optics explain this? You certainly could make an anamorphic image by putting a grid on your skull here, make a nonlinear grid, and then make one-to-one correspondence of the points. Now you've got a nonlinear skull. But if you linearly compress this, you get back the skull you started with, subject to the errors you made in making that transposition. Instead, I'm going to take a skull, I'm going to project and focus it at a grazing angle using a concave mirror, about which I haven't told you, but a concave mirror projects perfectly fine images. And when we do this, it'll smear it out and it looks like I've got an anamorphic skull. If I take away the concave mirror, well, I'll take a picture and I'll show you the picture in a minute. If I take away the anamorphic skull, this is, the mirror, this is the view of the skull from the mirror. This is what we should get back. After we expand it, grazing angles, do all sorts of stuff with it, we should get back this, we would think. But when I take the picture, we don't get that. The depth of field of the lens is too shallow. Only the jaw is in focus. Well, let's trace in the jaw because it's in focus. At this point, the rest of our canvas is blank. I have to refocus further into the skull. I've got to move my lens. Now I can do the teeth. So I'll paint the teeth and I'll piecewise put together the skull. There's a skull. We'll just kind of make it flat for us. There's the anamorphic skull. This is what would be on our board. If I linearly compress it, it's wrong. The jaw's too long, bulge back here, and a sinister eye. Optics gave us the look that's in that Holbein painting. And in fact, we can even see where he made a mistake. He accidentally traced that. He repeated a pattern. This is what he should have done. It should have looked like that. The magnification is linear in the vertical direction. It goes as 1/sine of grazing angle in the horizontal direction. So if he knew how to solve a piecewise segmented nonlinear transformation, he could have plotted it that way, but I don't think that's the case. So what we did, after discovering that optics was used at the dawn of the Renaissance, which nobody knew before, We asked the question, where did it come from? And this led us back into history, into Ibn Al-Haytham, about whom I'm going to say extremely little today, because I'm just about out of time. His name is translated into modern European languages. We often refer to him as Al-Hasan or Al-Hazain. The earliest texts that we regard as modern optical texts were written by Roger Bacon, Erasmus Vitalo, and John Peckham. It turns out that they directly drew all of their modern optical knowledge, most of it, from Ibn Al-Haytham, whose book in Arabic had recently been translated into Latin. And the thing that these guys had in common is they were all Roman Catholic priests. They were interested not actually in optics, they were interested in the theology of light. They thought if we could understand theological vision, we could understand theological vision through understanding human physical vision. So then this is extremely appropriate for this being the International Year of Light, to study physical vision, which we're going to hear more later today, to get insights into spiritual vision. And then one quick example here. These are the 7 deadly sins painted by Hieronymus Bosch. And to remind you, in case you want to practice them tonight, these are the 7 deadly sins. And a particular priest about whom I have a lot to say, John Wycliffe, who translated the Bible into English. The first time the Bible had been translated from Latin into a vernacular language, for which the Catholic Church didn't think that was an amusing thing to do, so they decided to convict him of heresy, to burn him at the cross for doing that. He equated the distortions of vision caused by the 7 types of mirrors analyzed by Ibn Al-Haytham with the 7 deadly sins. And there's a lot more I wish I had time to talk about.
Here's what's so revolutionary about what you're saying. You're saying the history of art, the history of the Renaissance, is the history of optics.
I am saying.
I know that, and you're blowing everything up. You're blowing everything that all of us who took art appreciation studied, all the art historians have written, and you're saying you're all wrong. It's all about optics.
We are. It is all about optics. And that hasn't made us popular with art historians. This is the end.
Спасибо, Чарльз. Давайте поблагодарим за выступление.